The shrill alarm pierced the toxic haze like a scream in the silence. Kale's breath came in sharp, controlled bursts as they knelt beside the crushed body of a miner trapped beneath a collapsing rock wall. Every second counted. The air burned in their lungs, thick with poison, but Kale's hands moved with steady precision. The miner's life hung by a thread, and only Kale's skill and determination could pull him back from the brink. This was no ordinary planet. This was a death world, an unforgiving world where the environment itself fought to kill every living thing. Storms of acid rain battered the landscape. Giant predators hunted in the shadows. The soil was laced with toxins that could corrode flesh in minutes. Here, survival was not guaranteed by strength alone, but by resilience, by cunning, and by a fierce will to endure. Kale was born into this harsh crucible. From their earliest days, they had watched friends and family fall to the dangers around them. But Kale refused to be just another casualty. Instead, they became a doctor, a healer forged in the fires of relentless peril. Their hands, calloused and steady, learned to treat wounds that would have meant death elsewhere. Their mind became sharp, inventing new techniques to save lives with whatever materials were at hand. Now, as the dust settled around the trapped miner, Kale's focus sharpened. The rock pressed against the man's chest, cutting off air. Kale wrapped a makeshift splint around the broken arm, then worked to stabilize the man's breathing. Time was running out. They reached for a small glowing vial, an experimental serum developed from the venom of the planet's deadliest creatures. It was risky, untested on humans, but in this world, risk was often the only option. A growl echoed from the shadows. Kale's eyes flicked up just in time to see a massive predator emerging from the haze, sharp claws, eyes glowing like embers. It moved with terrifying grace. Kale's heart pounded, but they did not flinch. They grabbed a compact energy blade from their belt and positioned themselves between the beast and the miner. The creature snarled, circling. Kale's mind raced. This was more than a test of skill. It was a test of will. To survive, Kale needed not just to heal, but to fight. The planet had never been kind, but it had made them strong. With a swift motion, Kale slashed at the beast. It recoiled, then charged. Kale dodged, their armor absorbing a glancing blow. The predator lunged again, but Kale was ready, driving the blade deep into its side. The beast fell, retreating into the shadows with a final, angry hiss. Kale's breath was ragged, but steady. They returned to the miner, injected the serum, and monitored his pulse. Slowly, color returned to the man's face. A faint smile touched his lips, the first sign of hope in hours. This was life on a death world, where every victory was hard-won and every moment was a battle. But Kale was more than a survivor. They were a healer, a fighter, and a beacon of hope in a place where hope was scarce. Unknown to Kale, their actions this day would mark the beginning of a journey far beyond their world. News of their bravery and skill began to spread quietly at first, carried on whispers between traders and explorers. Stories reached distant corners of the galaxy about a doctor who could heal wounds no one else dared to touch. And then came the invitation, an offer from the Galactic Medical Alliance, to leave the death world behind and join a league of healers spanning countless planets and species. For Kale, it was a chance to prove that even a child of one of the harshest planets could change the fate of the stars. But leaving would mean facing not only the unknown dangers of space, but the prejudices and doubts of those who saw Deathworlders as brutal, unrefined savages. It was a new kind of battle, one fought in council chambers and laboratories, far from the toxic storms and savage beasts of home. As Kale prepared to step into the wider galaxy, a single thought burned bright in their mind. Survival was not enough. They would not just live, They would become a legend. Kale's first steps off their homeworld were heavier than any armor they had ever worn. The sleek metal floor of the space station beneath their feet felt cold and sterile. Nothing like the raw, unforgiving soil they had known all their life. Around them, alien faces watched with curious eyes, some wary, others openly dismissive. Here, Kale was a stranger, an outsider from a world whispered about in hushed tones. A Deathworlder. The station buzzed with life, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. Strange illnesses were beginning to spread, and no one seemed to understand why. Patients filled the corridors, their symptoms baffling the most experienced doctors. Bodies weakened by fevers and strange marks that defied explanation. Kale's instincts sharpened as they walked among the sick. Something was wrong, far worse than simple disease. Whispers followed Kale like a shadow. The barbarian doctor. Too rough, too wild for civilized medicine. The prejudice stung, but Kale had learned to wear it like a second skin. Their resolve hardened. Suddenly, a young nurse stumbled toward them, eyes wide with panic. "Dr. Kale, you need to see this," she said, voice trembling. They followed her through twisting corridors to a small quarantine ward. Inside, patients writhed in agony, their bodies convulsing with fever. Machines beeped erratically, trying desperately to keep them alive. Kale's gaze flicked over the symptoms: rapid pulse, strange lesions spreading like wildfire. These signs did not match any known virus or bacteria. This was something new, something deadly. "We need to act fast," Kale said, voice steady despite the rising tension. "Seal this ward. No one in or out without strict decontamination." Their mind raced, recalling every lesson learned on their death world, every injury treated, every toxin survived. As Kale began their assessment, a cold voice cut through the chaos. "This is nothing but a minor outbreak. Quarantines are an overreaction," said Dr. Maris, a polished figure in the Galactic Medical Alliance. "Panic will do more harm than good." Kale's eyes locked with Maris's. "I've seen what happens when you ignore danger. I won't let more people die because of complacency." The room tensed. Politics and pride clashed with urgent reality. Kale knew this was the beginning of a long fight, one that would test not just their medical skills, but their ability to navigate the complex web of galactic power. Days passed, and the sickness spread. Kale worked tirelessly, often ignoring the wary stares and whispered doubts. Late one night, while reviewing patient data, they noticed a pattern. The infection seemed to cluster around certain shipments coming from a remote mining colony. Something contaminated the supply lines. Kale's suspicions grew. This was no natural outbreak. Someone was hiding something, perhaps even deliberately spreading the disease. Before Kale could act, a warning came. Their quarters were broken into, medical files tampered with. A clear message: stop digging. But Kale was not deterred. With the help of a small group of trusted allies, a cautious nurse, a retired engineer, and a sharp-eyed security officer, they began piecing together the truth. Smuggled bioweapons, corrupt officials, and greed had created a deadly storm threatening to engulf the entire station. Every step closer to the truth increased the danger. Shadows lengthened, eyes watched from dark corners, and every phone call might be a trap. Kale learned quickly that in this galaxy, healing was as much about fighting unseen enemies as curing the sick. Then came the night of the explosion. A storage unit in the cargo bay detonated, sending shockwaves through the station. Fires broke out and emergency alarms blared. Kale rushed into the chaos, knowing the outbreak would worsen if vital medical supplies were destroyed. In the aftermath, the council summoned Kale for questioning. Doubts and accusations flew. "Are you responsible for the chaos?" one official demanded. Or have you stirred a hornet's nest with your wild theories? Kale met their gaze without flinching. I am here to save lives, not to play politics. But if truth is ignored, more will die. We must act now before it's too late. Their words echoed in the silent chamber. The battle for trust and for survival had only just begun. The council chamber was cold and imposing, filled with towering beings from countless worlds. Kale stood at the center, their gaze steady despite the weight of suspicion pressing down on them. The air was thick with quiet judgment. Here, Kale was not a healer, but an outsider, a Deathworlder, someone from a brutal planet where survival was often a matter of violence, not diplomacy. Many whispered that such a background was a liability in the refined halls of the Galactic Medical Alliance. A senior counselor, draped in formal robes, spoke first. Dr. Kale, your reports suggest a bioweapon is spreading through our stations. This is a serious accusation. Yet your evidence is circumstantial at best. How do you justify this claim? Kale's voice was calm but firm. With all due respect, the pattern of infections cannot be natural. They cluster around certain cargo shipments. The virus behaves unlike any known pathogen. I have reason to believe someone is weaponizing this outbreak. Murmurs rippled through the council. Some nodded cautiously. Others frowned in disbelief. Another council member challenged Kale. You come from a world where danger is constant. Perhaps your fear clouds your judgment. What proof do you offer? Kale met their gaze directly. Last week, an engineer I trust discovered tampered shipments, containers altered to bypass safety protocols. I have testimonies, medical data, and the support of security personnel who witnessed suspicious activity. The council grew restless. Political tensions surfaced beneath the formal words. Some members had interests tied to the mining colonies implicated. Others feared the consequences of exposing such a conspiracy. Suddenly, the chamber doors slid open. A security officer entered, holding a datapad. Counselors, new intelligence has arrived. A covert communication intercepted. It confirms the presence of unauthorized biological agents aboard multiple shipments. The room fell silent. Eyes turned back to Kale, who felt a mix of vindication and dread. This confirms what I have said, Kale said. But this is only the beginning. Whoever is behind this will stop at nothing to protect their interests, even if it means more lives lost. As the council debated, Kale was left to wrestle with a deeper question. In a galaxy so vast, with so many factions and hidden agendas, who could be trusted? The enemy was not just the disease, it was the shadows behind the disease. Later, alone in a small medbay, Kale reviewed patient records once more. Their thoughts were interrupted by a quiet knock. A young nurse entered, her eyes wary but resolute. Doctor, some of the infected show symptoms that suggest immune suppression beyond the virus. It's as if something else is weakening them, perhaps a second agent. Kale nodded slowly. A double infection. That explains why treatments are failing. We are dealing with a far more complex threat than anyone imagined. The nurse hesitated. There are rumors, whispers of experimental weapons being tested on isolated colonies. It's horrifying. Kale's mind raced. The conspiracy was deeper, more sinister. But the clock was ticking. Every moment delay meant more deaths. That night, as Kale prepared for another round of treatments, an explosion shook the station. Alarms blared. Fires broke out near the medical wing. Kale raced through smoke-filled corridors, guided by the sounds of panic and pain. At the heart of a chaos, Kale found injured patients and staff trapped beneath debris. With grim determination, Kale organized rescue efforts, treating burns, fractures, and smoke inhalation with whatever supplies remained. Despite exhaustion, Kale's mind refused to rest. The attack was no accident, it was a warning. Someone wanted to silence them. Days later, whispers circulated through the station. Some called Kale a hero, others a dangerous radical. But Kale knew the truth was more complicated. To save lives, they had to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy and survive those who wished to bury it forever. Kale's journey was no longer just about medicine. It was a fight for justice, for truth, and for the fragile hope that even in darkness, healing could prevail. The sickness spread faster than anyone had anticipated. Clinics overflowed with the desperate and the dying. Kale moved from room to room, their hands steady even as their heart pounded with urgency. Patients showed signs no one had seen before: high fevers, unrelenting fatigue, strange discolorations creeping beneath their skin. Standard treatments failed repeatedly, and hope grew thin. Kale's Deathworld instincts told them this was not a normal disease. It was more aggressive, more insidious. The pathogen seemed to mutate rapidly, adapting to every treatment. Time was running out. The usual methods were useless. Kale knew they had to think differently, use what they had learned from the harshest environment in the galaxy. Late into the night, Kale studied samples under a microscope, searching for any weakness in the enemy they faced. Their fingers traced notes on makeshift paper, connecting dots others overlooked. There was a pattern, a vulnerability buried deep in the pathogen structure, something only the venom of a certain Deathworld predator could neutralize. It was a dangerous idea. The venom was deadly to most life, including humans. But Kale's people had survived by mastering the poisons around them. The serum they had used on the trapped miner was derived from that venom. It was untested on a wide scale, unapproved by any medical authority. Kale presented the idea to the station's medical council, knowing it would spark controversy. If we do nothing, more will die, Kale argued. This serum offers a chance. It is risky, yes, but it's the best option we have. Voices rose in protest. It's too dangerous. We don't know the side effects. This is reckless. You can't just impose Deathworld medicine on civilized patients. Kale met their doubts with quiet determination. Risk is inevitable in war against this disease. I've seen worse on my home planet and survived because I adapted. We must do the same here. Time was precious. Kale began administering the serum to a small group of patients who had no other hope. The first days were tense. Some reacted badly, others stabilized. Slowly, a glimmer of success appeared. Fever broke. Color returned. Lungs cleared. Word spread quickly. Hope, once a distant dream, began to return. But the victory was fragile. Political opposition grew fiercer. Those with vested interests in maintaining control over medical procedures saw Kale as a threat. There were whispered attempts to discredit them, to halt the serum trials. Meanwhile, the disease continued to mutate. New strains appeared, more resistant, more deadly. Kale realized this was not just an outbreak. It was a pandemic engineered to evolve, to resist, to destroy. One night, Kale received a message from their trusted allies, evidence that the bioweapon was linked to a powerful mining consortium seeking to suppress workers and sabotage rivals. The implications were staggering. This was not just a medical crisis. It was corporate warfare on a cosmic scale. Kale's resolve hardened. They would fight on two fronts, to save lives and to expose those who sought profit in death. But the cost weighed heavily. The station was on edge. Fear, suspicion, and anger filled the air. Kale found themselves isolated, their every move watched, every word scrutinized. Despite the pressure, Kale never wavered. They pushed forward, refining the serum, training staff, and coordinating emergency response teams. Their Deathworlder resilience became the backbone of the fight. At the height of crisis, Kale stood on the observation deck, looking out at the sprawling city beyond the station's walls. The glittering lights and busy traffic hid the storm beneath. Kale knew the battle was far from over. Yet, in the faces of the recovering patients, in the grateful eyes of the staff, Kale found strength. The odds were staggering, the enemies many, but so was the will to survive. This was not just about medicine anymore. It was about hope, and Kale was determined to be the beacon. The atmosphere in the medical wing was tense, yet charged with a renewed sense of purpose. Kale's experimental serum was slowly turning the tide, but it wasn't enough. The disease evolved faster than they could adapt, striking down patients who had shown signs of recovery. Kale knew that to truly stop the pandemic, they had to trace the source and cut it off at its root. With a small team of trusted allies, Kale launched a covert investigation into the mining consortium suspected of spreading the bioweapon. Data networks were hacked, encrypted messages decrypted, and hidden shipments tracked across star systems. Every lead pointed to one place, a remote, heavily fortified mining colony on the edge of known space. The colony was a fortress, shielded by layers of security and guarded by mercenaries loyal to the consortium. Kale's team had no official sanction to go there. It was a dangerous mission, but time was running out. If the colony was allowed to continue its operations, countless more lives across the galaxy would be lost. Kale's mind raced as they prepared. This mission was no longer about healing in sterile hospital rooms. It was about confronting corruption, greed, and deadly ambition in the rawest form. The journey to the mining colony was fraught with danger. As they approached, their ship was intercepted by patrol vessels. Communications were jammed, and hostile warnings crackled over the channel. Kale's ship barely escaped, forced into a tense chase through asteroid fields and ion storms. It was a test of piloting skill and nerve, but the team's resolve never faltered. Once they landed on the colony, the reality hit hard. The air was thick with toxic dust, machinery groaned under strain, and exhausted miners moved like shadows in the dim light. Kale saw firsthand the suffering caused by poor safety measures and deliberate sabotage. Many miners showed early symptoms of infection, coughing, rashes, weakness. Kale approached the colony's medical bay, only to be met with hostility. The lead medic, a grizzled veteran, warned them to leave. "This isn't your fight," he growled. "We're doing what we can, but the truth is messy. Powerful forces don't want this exposed." Kale pressed on, determined to gather evidence. They interviewed miners in secret, examined hidden records, and discovered traces of the bioweapons components stored in guarded facilities. The conspiracy ran deep. Corporate executives had deliberately unleashed the pathogen to eliminate competition and suppress worker revolts. Word spread quickly. Kale's presence did not go unnoticed. Security forces closed in, hunting for the intruder. Kale barely escaped an ambush, slipping through narrow tunnels and vents. Their heart pounded, but their will burned brighter. This was the fight they had trained for, the challenge their harsh homeworld had prepared them to face. Back on the station, news of Kale's mission stirred mixed reactions. Some hailed them as a hero risking everything to save the galaxy. Others whispered that they were reckless, dangerous, even a threat to galactic stability. Kale understood the risks, but refused to back down. The stakes were higher than ever. Lives depended on exposing the truth and stopping the spread of the deadly virus. As Kale regrouped with their team in a safe house, they reviewed the evidence collected. The scale of the conspiracy was staggering. Plans to distribute mutated strains across multiple colonies, sabotage quarantine efforts, and silence whistleblowers. Kale's resolve hardened. They would bring this to light, no matter the cost. The next step was clear: presenting the evidence to the Galactic Medical Alliance Council and rallying support to dismantle the mining consortium's operations. But Kale knew the fight was far from over. Powerful enemies lurked in the shadows, and the battle for truth and survival was only just beginning. In the quiet moments before the next move, Kale looked out at the stars beyond the station's windows. A galaxy filled with danger, deception, but also hope. They were no longer just a doctor from a death world. They were a symbol of resistance, a beacon of resilience in the darkest of times. And Kale would not stop until the galaxy was safe. Kale stood before the Galactic Medical Alliance Council, their evidence laid out in sharp, undeniable detail. Screens displayed intercepted communications, medical data, and testimonies from miners risking their lives to speak out. The room was silent, the weight of truth settling heavily over the gathered officials. Many faces showed shock, others thinly veiled anger. The lead counselor leaned forward, voice steady but grave. "Dr. Kale, if what you say is true, this is a betrayal of the highest order. A bioweapon unleashed for profit, endangering countless lives. What do you propose we do?" Kale's reply was firm. Immediate sanctions against the consortium. Full investigations of all affected colonies. Deployment of emergency medical teams with access to the serum. And protections for whistleblowers. This is not just a medical crisis, it's a galactic threat. Debate erupted. Some council members feared political fallout. Others worried about destabilizing fragile alliances. But Kale's determination swayed many. The evidence was irrefutable, and the urgency impossible to ignore. Amid the arguments, Kale's thoughts drifted to the miners still suffering, the patients still fighting for breath. Time was running out. The council finally voted to act. Sanctions were imposed, military and medical forces mobilized, and Kale was given command of a specialized task force to lead the containment effort. It was a victory, but a dangerous one. Kale's team moved quickly, coordinating efforts across star systems. They set up quarantine zones, distributed the serum, and worked tirelessly to halt the disease's spread. Each victory was hard-won. Mutated strains challenged their progress, requiring constant adaptation. But the team's spirit held strong, fueled by Kale's unyielding resolve. One night, as Kale reviewed reports in their quarters, a message flashed on the screen. An anonymous tip revealed the location of a secret lab where the consortium developed the bioweapon. It was heavily guarded, but crucial to shutting down the source. Kale assembled a strike team, engineers, medics, security specialists. The mission was high risk, but necessary. They infiltrated the facility under cover of darkness, navigating tight corridors filled with advanced technology and dangerous traps. Inside, Kale found evidence of horrific experiments, engineered viruses, weaponized toxins, and data files detailing plans for future attacks. The reality of the conspiracy was even darker than imagined. Suddenly, alarms blared. The team was discovered. Gunfire erupted in narrow hallways. Kale's training kicked in, directing medics to treat wounded, leading security forces in countermeasures, and securing critical data drives. The firefight was brutal. Several team members were injured, but Kale refused to retreat. They secured the lab's mainframe and transmitted the data to the Galactic Medical Alliance before escaping through emergency exits. Back on the station, the evidence shocked the galaxy. Public outcry surged, and the consortium's leaders faced arrest and trial. Kale's name spread far and wide, not just as a healer, but as a warrior against corruption and death. Yet, the battle was not over. New threats emerged as factions sought to fill the void left by the consortium. Kale realized that the fight for the galaxy's health and justice was a long road, one that demanded constant vigilance. Despite exhaustion, Kale remained a beacon of hope. They trained new doctors, improved the serum, and forged alliances across species and systems. Their Deathworlder spirit, tough, adaptable, unyielding, became an inspiration to many. One evening, as stars glittered outside the medbay windows, Kale looked toward the future. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but so was its capacity for resilience and healing. Kale smiled quietly. Their journey from a harsh death world to galactic legend was far from over. But one thing was certain: they would face whatever came next with courage and compassion. Because in the end, survival was not enough. They would make sure that hope survived, too. The galaxy had taken notice. Kale's name was no longer whispered in skepticism, but spoken with respect, even reverence. Yet with recognition came new challenges. The fragile peace following the consortium's fall was uneasy. Power vacuums bred unrest. New factions scrambled for influence, some with their own dangerous agendas. Kale understood the truth better than most. Healing the galaxy required more than medicine. It demanded diplomacy, vigilance, and sometimes sacrifice. Their role had shifted from doctor to guardian, a symbol of resilience in a universe teetering on the edge. One day, a distress call came from a distant colony deep in uncharted space. Reports described an outbreak with symptoms eerily similar to the bioweapon crisis. The colony was isolated, its communication fragile, and the risk of the disease spreading was high. Without hesitation, Kale led a medical team through the stars. Upon arrival, the scene was grim. Hospitals were overwhelmed, many patients beyond help. But Kale's mind, sharpened by years of hardship, searched for answers. Initial tests revealed something alarming. The pathogen had mutated again. This strain was faster, more aggressive, and resistant to the serum. It was as if the disease had evolved with intent, adapting to every countermeasure thrown at it. Kale felt a chill, but refused despair. They delved into research, poring over samples, comparing genetic markers. A pattern emerged. The disease's mutations were influenced by an unknown factor, something environmental, something deliberately engineered. As days passed, Kale's team faced mounting casualties. Medical supplies dwindled. Staff grew weary. Morale sagged. The community looked to Kale not just for cures, but for hope. One night, a breakthrough came. A local scientist shared data suggesting the presence of a clandestine facility nearby, an underground lab where further bioengineering might be happening. Kale knew this was their chance to stop the threat before it spiraled out of control. Mobilizing quickly, Kale organized a covert expedition. The terrain was harsh, barren wastelands and jagged rocks that mirrored Kale's own Deathworld home. The team moved carefully, evading patrols and surveillance. Inside the lab, they uncovered horrifying experiments, genetic manipulation far beyond previous atrocities. This was the work of extremists seeking to weaponize life itself. Kale's heart clenched. The fight was no longer just about medicine. It was about defending the very essence of life and freedom. Their discovery triggered alarms. Security forces descended rapidly. The team fought through corridors filled with traps and toxic gas. Kale's leadership and quick thinking saved lives, but the price was high. Several team members were injured, some critically. Back on the colony's medical center, Kale worked relentlessly, treating wounds while coordinating defense. The serum was tweaked to counter the new mutations, and with time, hope returned. News of the lab's destruction and the exposed extremists spread across the galaxy. Many hailed Kale as a hero once more, but Kale knew this victory was temporary. The darkness they fought was adaptive, relentless. Still, Kale's resolve never faltered. They expanded training programs, sharing knowledge across worlds. They built alliances not just of convenience, but of genuine trust, knowing that unity was essential for survival. In quiet moments, Kale reflected on the journey, from the unforgiving death world that had shaped them, to the vast and perilous galaxy they now served. They carried one belief above all, that even in the harshest conditions, life fought to endure. Kale's story was far from over. The galaxy's challenges would evolve, but so would they, stronger, wiser, and unyielding. Because legends are not born from comfort, but from the courage to face the impossible. And Kale was ready for whatever came next. The galaxy was quieter now, but the calm was deceptive. Kale knew all too well that peace was fragile, always threatened by the next crisis lurking in the shadows. Their journey from a Deathworld doctor to a legend was marked by battles, loss, and relentless determination. Now, standing at the pinnacle of their influence, Kale faced the ultimate challenge. A mysterious signal pulsed from the edge of known space, a distress call unlike any before. It was garbled, urgent, and coded in a language Kale had never heard. Yet it carried a message clear as a beacon. Help was needed, and fast. Kale assembled a team of specialists, linguists, scientists, security experts. The mission was unprecedented. They would venture beyond the map stars, into uncharted voids where danger waited in silence. As their ship pierced the darkness, Kale felt the familiar tension of the unknown. Every pilot's instinct screamed caution. Every sensor alert hinted at hidden threats. But Kale's resolve was ironclad. This was their purpose, to confront the galaxy's shadows head-on. Days into the journey, they encountered an abandoned outpost, drifting like a ghost among asteroids. Inside, signs of a sudden evacuation were everywhere, scattered equipment, incomplete logs, and eerie silence. The team scoured the data terminals, piecing together a chilling story. An alien civilization had been wiped out by a force that defied explanation. Kale's medical scanner detected faint biosignatures, traces of survivors, barely clinging to life, hidden in the outpost's depths. The team raced against time to find them. When they did, the survivors revealed a tale of a new kind of pathogen, one that manipulated memories, inducing hallucinations so vivid they drove victims to madness. This pathogen was unlike anything Kale had faced. It was a psychological weapon, targeting the mind itself. The disease turned friends into enemies, hope into despair. Kale worked tirelessly, combining medical science with psychological insight. They developed treatments to counteract the hallucinations and stabilize the mind. It was grueling work, testing their knowledge and spirit. As they helped the survivors, Kale uncovered disturbing evidence. The pathogen was engineered by an unknown faction aiming to destabilize entire civilizations without direct warfare. The implications were terrifying. This was the dawn of a new kind of war. Determined to stop the spread, Kale led their team to trace the pathogen's origin. The trail led to a hidden base deep within a nebula, shrouded in deadly radiation and guarded by automated defenses. Navigating through deadly fields of energy, Kale's team infiltrated the base. Inside, they found laboratories filled with twisted experiments, genetic manipulation, mind control devices, and bioweapons designed to shatter societies. The team collected data and destroyed the facilities, but the cost was high. Several were injured, and Kale faced moments where giving up seemed the easier path. Yet the memory of those saved and the belief in the galaxy's potential fueled their endurance. Back aboard their ship, with a base in ruins and data secured, Kale sent a message to the Galactic Medical Alliance, a call to unite against this new existential threat. The galaxy needed more than doctors. It needed guardians ready to protect life in all its forms. Kale's journey had come full circle, from the brutal landscapes of a death world to the farthest reaches of space, fighting enemies seen and unseen. Their story was one of resilience, courage, and unwavering hope. As the ship glided through the stars, Kale looked ahead, knowing the future would hold more trials. But they also knew that as long as there were those willing to stand and fight, the light of hope would never fade. Kale, the Deathworlder doctor who became a legend, had not only saved lives, they had inspired a galaxy to believe in survival, in justice, and in the power of one determined soul to change the course of history.